The conversation about PowerPoints. This video is for 2 points, particularly kind of making images a little bit cleaner and how they're incorporated, and also provides some kind of background information about color and color usage. So if we go to the first slide, the original ones will be listed with 2022. The updates don't have a label. Didn't really connect with people. They didn't really respond to it. They didn't know who the author was. They didn't know the name of the book. This was for students who were in a program that didn't have color theory, which should have been kind of a fair warning that I needed a little bit more than that. But when the updated one, is a very kind of iconic book that they've seen in standard bookstores, maybe on teacher shelves, but it allowed for people to go, I've seen that. Whereas the first one, there wasn't enough information to connect them to the material. Also just kind of made a little bit more visually engaging slide. Next one was a terminology slide. It's fine. It kind of does the basics, but it doesn't give them any reason to kind of engage past that. Here it's a little bit more in depth, more variations of a single hue, allowed for a little bit more conversation, which was helpful in this case. Moving from kind of single colors to the color wheel and how they were using. This had this kind of death image of PowerPoint where somebody's definitely just taken an image, thrown it into the slide. It's not integrated in any way. It stands out. It kind of serves its purpose, very functional, but very limited engagement. By switching up a few details and making the background match the same of the image and the slide, had a much cleaner feel. Not necessarily crazy about this, but I think that's the part of kind of updating these over time. This was only a presentation given a couple of times, so you can kind of see the jump between the two. Same kind of point to make here, that white background, very jarring, very like cut and paste, compared to just switching out, makes it feel kind of like a cohesive element. And then another just kind of giving an example of the color harmonies, which in the original presentation, there wasn't any kind of practical examples, and it really left students in that theoretical space that wasn't something they could walk away with. This one goes a little bit further. This was a standard image used. I was thinking more of continuity between, the YouTube videos, the PowerPoints, and the handouts. And so it came from a class that I did, and so it was consistent in any platform. They looked at the information, but in a presentation, it just didn't work the same. So kind of a quick update of the image, pretty easy to find, something that'll work. But switching up the colors, that background, I think you can see makes a big difference. Taking it further, de-emphasizing the text just by lowering that contrast. It's not that stark white, it's gray, allowing them to focus on something else, but also giving them information if they wanted to take notes. I thought this was a good example of where text was detrimental, doesn't make sense out of a context where people already understand, but going to something nice and clean like this allowed for a lot more kind of conversation about what was happening and why. I think it, helps to summarize this overall point of, how do we use images compared to text, and you've all seen those academic PowerPoints. It's just text heavy. It's just a lot of words, and sometimes people just read it, and where's the engagement between those two? Same thing here with the image of white background, filling that cut and paste, simply inverting the image, it's a world of difference. And so that repetition of seeing these go from something that's copy and pasted to something that's part of it. Here, this is an example of just where theoretical didn't quite cover. If they didn't have any background, they weren't really able to approach this. They've probably seen these slides like this in museums, these color pairings. It's somewhat common in a lot of art how-to books, but taking it and giving some more practical, much more engaging presentation, and the multiples there, I think, did a good job of giving them all something to respond to, keeping in mind that color theory has issues with people having color deficiency, so they don't always see what the point of the topic was. But that multiplication of the images, of using six of them to help give people different points they could kind of attach to. Again, same point, but trying to emphasize some of the finer details of what was happening, which is not really as relevant to the discussion we're having. Original slide, consistent with all the other formats, relatively boring, probably unpleasant to look at. The follow-up, a little easier to look at, but still not engaging. New one changed it up kind of entirely and really helped kind of emphasize the point by building the image into the PowerPoint, making it kind of very applicable to what we're trying to do. If you think about the presentation that was given on RODPT, the background was a transition from very structured and rigid to very fluid. And sometimes you can find filters and things in programs that help you do that with just a few little steps. This was just a matter of copying and pasting the different colors, separating them out, and putting them side by side so people can kind of see that visual effect and see them separately, where it doesn't happen when they're independent of each other. And then building on how to kind of dull it down a little bit. But the visuals of fit, they're in the same position. And so that positioning, I think, really helped them kind of engage with this a little bit better. Probably a little bit excessive chopping it up and messing with it, but that's the idea too of this is, what do we learn? What do we take away from and each new variation, each new version of a presentation. And then, of course, one last one, because we might as well continue to beat this horse. But it worked all right for the point that was trying to be made at that time. We're trying to show how less edges cause less of that uncomfortable vibration feeling that was there. Next slide was a good example of where it's very theoretical. It's not really giving them any good application. Even though we're talking about application, the image didn't really match with the goal of what was being said. And so coming back to a famous image that they could interact with. This is one of an after image where if you stare at this long enough and then go look somewhere else, you'll actually see the colors in a totally different way. And so much more interactive than the previous one. Didn't really didn't help transition the conversation to a new topic. But while this image was far outside of what the other ones were, which were more examples of what was being done in class and what was done in the book, this kind of stepped outside of that and helped drive it home. Last, I have some just examples of the student thing to kind of show the differences of color and contrast, which goes back to the earlier slides if you wanted to look that up. There's a bunch of videos on the YouTube page that really go through it, but you can kind of see the differences of how kind of simple patterns get to be more interesting at times. They can be toned down, how different uses of color can be kind of more dramatic. It's kind of dull and flat. But that's the nice part of having student examples. You can kind of see where they developed over time and different intentions. Did they want the background to draw them in, but then have the focus be somewhere else? Or was it meant to be more subdued? What role is the image playing? I thought this was a nice slide for that. This one's not probably as applicable as I thought initially, but it's the idea of making a palette, and then you can use it consistently across all of your classes, all of your presentations within a class. That continuity can help kind of with engagement, because if you break from the continuity, then it really draws them in, which again, color theory thing, also other applications. I like this because it's very simple. They weren't doing a whole lot with design, which was fine. The colors is kind of flat though, but some minor changes shows how much, if you just switch up value a little bit or saturation a little bit, it has that more polished feel. And with the Adobe Express at OSU, it really makes doing this relatively easy. I don't want to keep going through that over and over again. This one's got a nice variation of, do you have a darker palette? Do you have a lighter palette? What do you want to do? And do you want to go as far as developing your own palette that you use that maybe is different for different courses, but has that? And then it also makes it so you don't ever have to think about what colors you're using. I think that's about it for this. So that was part of what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to do a couple more of these maybe, and then we'll go from there.